The Roaring Twenties. Overview 1. Men's dress, women's dress, gender roles, and education. The Roaring Twenties, also known as the Jazz Age, approximately took place during the years of 1920 through 1929. This period was an age well known for trying to return to normalcy after the First World War. This era was categorized as one of the significant times due to the shifts that occurred during this age, such as gender roles, women's rights, women's fashion, music, and men's fashion. Men's clothing and accessories and footwear. This shift in men's fashion during the 1920s was less dramatic as the men's three-piece suit was still incorporated into daily dress. They paired them with Oxford shoes, accessories such as gloves, handkerchiefs, scarves, and canes, as well as watches, tie pins, cufflinks, and rings. The usual hairstyles that they would do would be in short cuts styled with pomades, waxes, and men would often accessorize them with fedoras, straw boaters, Panama hats, and flat caps. Women's dress. Women in the 1920s started to develop a new sense of dress as they decided to ditch the corsets and puffy skirts and replace it with a more relaxed and progressive sense of fashion. The most popular of this time was the tomboy look, also known as la glacion look. This style of dress was often paired with pumps, oxfords, and as well as jewelry, which was inspired by Art Deco and costume. Women's hair started to get more shorter as the bob cut was all the craze. Some hairstyles included the shingle haircut, Eton top cut, and Marcel waves. Women usually accessorize headdress into their hairdos, such as the cloche hat, headbands, turbans, and berets. Women's rights movement. The 1920s paved the way for liberated women. Women in the 20s started to go against the stereotypical idea of how women were perceived as housewives. An important milestone during the 1920s was the women's rights movement, which was an event highlighted in history due to the successful impact it had on the United States. This movement lasted for many years until the 1920s when the 19th Amendment was finally passed, which allowed women the right to vote as well as being able to work in the workforce and have a higher education. This movement led to shifts in women characteristics such as the change in the fashion industry. These flapper girls are a representation of the women's rights movement, and they still stuck with the tomboy look but added their own touch, making the dresses more shorter and applied shiny embellishments and trims. They went against the stereotypical roles of women by participating in activities that were not usually done by women during the previous years, such as smoking, drinking alcohol in public, driving in and out of cars, making out with men in the back of cars, and performing dances in public settings. Education was for both men and women after the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. During the 1920s, almost 21,587,000 students were enrolled in public schools. Students also had the opportunity to enroll in higher education such as college and university. A popular known school that opened its doors in the 1920s was UCLA, which opened in 1929. Middle-class women still had the privilege of affording garments to stay on trend, but instead of high-quality garments, their silk was made of rayon. This was an artificial and less expensive alternative to silk. Middle-class men had the same style characteristics as upper-class men, but cheaper fabrics. The lower-class individuals would not have the same financial privilege of affording high-quality fabrics, but had garments made to last longer periods of time, made out of fabrics and fibers like tweed and wool, which provided them warmth throughout the season. Wealthy class. The upper classes in the United States as well as in Europe were able to afford various luxuries like high-quality silks, beaded and rhinestone fabrics for the creation of their garments, which indicated their status wealth. Women of the upper class were able to afford the privilege of dressing in designer clothing, and upper-class men attire consisted of high-quality garments which exude wealth. One way that the wealthy class can distinguish their status would be through the fur fashion craze, as wealthy people would wear mink, fox, and sable fur, while lower class would wear weasel, squirrel, rabbit, and skunk fur. Christianity religion was a big population during the 1920s. Traits that influence fashion. High fashion and high-quality garments would be shipped from fashion-dominated areas such as Paris or Europe to the United States, which would cause the wealthy class to increase their fashion style due to this sort of trade. Overview 3. Art, jazz music, and artists, movie, and influence in fashion. Art during the 1920s was a form of escapism after the events of the World War I. An important and influential art style that was popular during this time was the Art Deco style and Surrealism. Tamara de Lempicka, a French artist known as the Queen of the Roaring Twenties, followed the Art Deco movement in her paintings by portraying vibrant colors and abstract shapes, and she applied this to her life as well. Salvador Dali was also an artist who used the Surrealism art style. He was big in the art industry, and he started working with other artists and designers to showcase his art. The music industry was one of the most influential industries in the 1920s, especially with the genre of jazz, as it allowed for the acceptance of people of color to be given respect, as it brought people together of all ages, genders, and races. Jazz music was created in New Orleans, which was prominently an African American community, and they developed different genres of music such as jazz music, blues, ragtime, and dance music. This genre of jazz music broke the cycle of conventionalism that allowed individuals of African American descent to be recognized for their talent, as they were able to highlight famous artists such as Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, and Louis Armstrong. The movie industry was important during the 1920s, especially for designers such as Adrian Greenberg and Edith Head, who designed for a variety of movies which impacted the fashion industry, and it also was a time for a rise in cinema for movie artists, and